everybody, it's February 2026 and Sewcialites 3 has officially launched. I'm going to be sewing along with Fat Quarter Shop. This is a free quilt along. It has 25 blocks. You can make this in 3 different sizes and it's just starting now. A new block is going to come out every Friday with the exception of the July 4th weekend, and then they're going to have finishing instructions. I'm going to put a link below where you can get all of the free information and all of the downloads. I bought the binder during Sewcialites 2. I don't know if they're still available. If they are, I'll make sure that they are linked below. There's information here about Fat Quarter Shop's Facebook group for Sewcialites, and it talks about the fabric requirements, 3-inch, 6-inch, 9-inch. I'm going to be sewing up the 9-inch blocks, and I'm using laundry basket quilts fabrics from the Little Sweetheart and Cloud 9 collections. I'll show you those in a moment. Fat Quarter Shop does have these downloads available. It gives you some examples of different fabric collections and what they're going to look like. They show you all of the blocks, and then they have this coloring page with the final layout. I'm not sure I'm going to do this final layout or not. I'm going to do a block tutorial for each of the blocks, and then when we get closer to the end, I'll decide if I want to lay it out like this or in a different way. There's also a pre-cut guide. If you're working with pre-cuts, this helps you select what you're going to need. You can see I've got a bunch of empty sheet protectors. I'm ready for this year. Here's my Sewcialites 2. This is still available. One of the things that's nice is we're going to be doing Sewcialites 3. So this is the 3rd time they've done this. There's Sewcialites 2 and Sewcialites 1. If you look at the blocks for Sewcialites 3, maybe there's one you don't like. Like, I really like the strawberry, but let's say you're allergic to strawberries, so you don't want a strawberry in your quilt, or maybe you're allergic to flowers. You want to switch it out. You can switch it out. You can go back to Sewcialites 2 and you can pull another block. Maybe you really like butterflies. This was in Sewcialites 2. So when you look at the blocks for Sewcialites 3, maybe you'd rather use a butterfly than a heart. Up to you. There's definitely different choices available. I did save all the patterns, so I have these available in case I ever want to make any of these blocks again. I downloaded today's block that we're going to be working on, and I'm going to sew this along with you. I'll be sewing on my Singer Featherweight today. This is a free download. I'll make sure the link is below. Up here, it gives you a block skill level. There's beginner, intermediate, and experience. They have this block marked as intermediate, but we're going to go through it step by step. And by working with the 9-inch block, it's going to be easier for you to see this on camera. And if you're a beginner, I would recommend working with the 9-inch block. Maybe the 6, don't do the 3. It's going to be too difficult. But we're going to go through all of these blocks step by step, and you'll be able to follow along. If you watched Kimberly's block tutorial on Friday, she uses the triangles on a roll. I don't do that. I do traditional quilting. We're going to follow the instructions. So if you're a new quilter, this is all going to be basic, easy, step by step. This is 2 pages. And as you're looking through the pattern, you'll see there's some measurements in parentheses. That's for 3-inch, 6-inch, and 9-inch. Again, I'm doing the 9-inch, but the basic techniques will be the same no matter which size you're going to work on. As I finish each block, I'm going to put it in this box that the binder came in. It's like a little pizza box. This is the perfect size. It'll keep everything organized for the duration of the quilt along. Let's have a look at my fabrics. I have 2 fabric collections here from Laundry Basket Quilts, Cloud 9 and Little Sweetheart. You can see I've got reds and pinks and creams. Everything is starched. I give everything a spray with the Faultless heavy finish, hanging on a laundry drying rack and let it dry. I haven't ironed anything yet. As I'm selecting my fabrics, I'll iron before I cut. I'll go ahead and show you all the fabrics really quick in case you like this colorway. These are older collections. I believe one is from 2017 and one is from, one's from 2017 and the other one is from 2021. They may or may not still be available. I have kind of a big fabric collection. It's time to start using everything. But one thing about this kind of project, and you can join the Fat Quarter Shop Facebook group, and I have a Facebook group as well, I'll link that below, is you can see what other people are doing. You can get the same fabrics, or maybe you like these pinks and reds and creams, but if this fabric isn't available, you can look for things in the same colorway. This print is interesting because it has blue. It's the only one that has blue. When I go to use this print, I'm not putting blue in this quilt. It's just going to be pink, reds, and creams. So I'll be cutting around that color. And the first set of fabrics that I showed you, these creams, those are going to be for the backgrounds. The other colors like this, the browns and the pinks and the reds, are going to be more of the colors for the block. What's interesting about this collection is there's a couple prints like this. They're a woven. They have a completely different feel than the rest of the fabrics, and when I starch them, they don't even get crispy. You can kind of see how stiff these are. I gave them a pretty good starch. I wasn't sure when I did the starching what size block I was going to use. And again, look, see? This fabric doesn't get stiff when starched. But I wanted to make sure everything was prepped. Starching helps me cut and sew more accurately, and also cuts down a little bit on the fraying. We're almost to the bottom. Now we're in the reds. So you can see some of the same prints are repeated in the different colorways. Two more. Those are my fabrics. So we're going to look at today's block, and we're going to go through how I pick fabrics for the block. Hopefully that'll give you some ideas of how to select fabrics. Let's talk about pulling fabrics for your block. A and B are going to be the same. You can make them different. I'm going to keep them the same. It's going to be my background, and you can see right here it says background A and B, and C, D, and E we have print fabrics. I look at the block, and I actually started for this one with the background and the corners. For the A and B, I picked this, one of the creams, and it's got the little squiggly line and the dots. The line has some red, some pink, and then you've got gold. So that's going to be my A and B, and it's non-directional. So when I cut this and make these half square triangles, this doesn't matter. I don't have to worry about lining anything up or flipping anything. I don't have to worry about that. Print C is orange in the picture. For C, I wanted something that's going to anchor the block. They have that in orange in the picture. I picked something red with a little bit of a bigger print. We have the opportunity here making these half square triangles to showcase a bit of a bigger print with the 9-inch size. So I'm using that for C. For D, we have the star points. I went ahead and I pulled gold for that. We've got the background with the little gold dots. There's some gold here. And I thought D might look nice. D is the blue, and kind of pull it all together. For E, you've got 4 little squares. And if you don't want to make 4 little squares, you could actually cut one big square. And if you want to do that, you would flip to the back, and it tells you finished size 1.5 inch, 2.5 inch, or 3.5 inch. So for the 9-inch block, if you want one solid square of color, you would cut a 3.5 inch square. I picked red and pink, and I picked the same print. Has the same leaf print. I wanted a little bit of red in the center. Since my C is red, it's going to kind of anchor it. We'll have a little red here and a little red here. And I wanted to make sure it's going to contrast. These are going to be my fabrics. I'm going to iron these, and then we'll go ahead and we'll cut our fabric together. We're going to cut for our block. Now I'm cutting for the 9-inch size, so if you're cutting for 6-inch or 3-inch, your measurements are going to be different. Since this is the first video in the series, I'm going to go over some basics, and I'll probably skip those as we go further through the series. I'm working with fat quarters. The first thing I want to do is make sure I'm going to have a nice straight edge for measuring and cutting. When I lay my ruler down, I'll be measuring on the side here. So I'm going to flip this over like that. I'm on the back side, and I want to make sure I have a nice straight line here to measure with. I'm going to grab a longer ruler. This is a 6.5 by 24 inch Creative Grids ruler. If you're new to quilting, I think 2 of the best rulers to have, 6.5 by 24, 6.5 by 12.5, and something that's been generally helpful to me is a 5-inch square ruler. Any brand, whatever brand you're comfortable with. Some are different colors, the numbers are different sizes, whatever you're most comfortable with. What I want to do is line it up, and you can see here how the ruler is right at the edge of the fabric, and a little fabric pokes up here and a lot pokes down here. So we're going to straighten that out. I'm going to take a line and kind of line it across the top. It doesn't have to be perfect. The idea is just to give me a straight edge here, because that's where I'm going to be cutting. Right here there's no fabric. There's a little here and a bunch here. Let's grab our rotary cutter. I have 45mm Olfa cutters. I like this ergonomic cutter. You squeeze it, and you push the little button, and the blade stays out. You can push the button and release it, or you can just hold it, however you want to use it. I'm going to go bottom to top. hold the ruler in place. Set that aside. Always close it before you set it down. You'd be surprised how many times you move your hand and you accidentally nick the blade. You don't want to do that. It's really painful. Now I have a nice clean edge. I'm going to flip that over. That's going to be the side that I'm cutting from. And whether you cut from the top or the selvage, it doesn't matter. Just remember, if you're cutting by the selvage, to account for that. We're going to be cutting A and B for this block. You probably just heard the bird squeaking. That's going to happen. We have two birds. We have a Rosella parrot and a canary, and you'll hear them in the background. This little triangle here means you can use the triangles on a roll. I'm not going to do this. This is all going to be traditional cutting. So I need two 4.5 inch squares and two 4 inch squares. If you don't want to cut with the selvage, just flip it over. And now the selvage is up here. I'm cutting on the back side, but it just doesn't matter for this. I need to cut two 4.5 inch squares and two 4 inch squares. So 4.5 plus 4.5 is 9. So I can grab my ruler, and this ruler has whole numbers on one side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 is right here. Half numbers on this side. 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5. So here's 4.5. So if I turn this like this and line up the 4.5, and I want 4.5 by 9 because I'm going to cut it in half. Here's the number 9. I can slide that down. This side is nice and straight. That's the side we just trimmed. This side, not so much. So I'm going to leave a little extra here. So I'm cutting 4.5 by 9. Let's cut that. I slow down as I get to the top. Okay, let's pull this aside. Now I need two 4.5 inch squares. So I've got 4.5. I'm lining up here at the top, nice and clean. And this actually looks like it's just a little bit off. So let's straighten that out. Just a tiny, tiny bit. It'll be fine. Okay. I'll still get 4.5 inch squares out of that. So let's line up for 4.5. Straight, straight, 4.5. And then this should be 4.5, but remember I cut a little extra because the one edge was crooked. So we're going to straighten that out. 4.5, and here's 4, 4.5. There's my two 4.5 inch squares. I'm going to put these on my design board, and I'll show you the design board when we get ready to sew everything. That's A. So make sure you keep track of it. You can use sticky notes. You can lay it out a certain direction, however it's easiest for you to keep track of everything. Same fabric. We need two 4 inch squares. I'm going to cut from the same spot I just used. So I need 4 by 8. And then I can cut it in half. I'm going to turn the ruler over so I see the number 4. Line that up. 7.5, 8.5. I want 8. It should be nice and clean now, but I'll actually cut it probably about 8 1/4 just in case it's a little uneven. 4, and then I'm just over 8. Let's go ahead and cut that. And then what I do is I fold everything when I'm done cutting, and I set it aside. I try to keep my fabrics as neat as I can while I'm working with them. And I'm keeping all of my fabrics in a plastic tote. They're all piled up together. We need two 4 inch squares. Let's see if that side is clean. That side should be nice and clean. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4. Use that clean edge. 4 inches. Making sure this is nice and straight and this is nice and straight. So these are just basic cutting techniques for traditional cutting. Nothing fancy. Two 4 inch squares. Let's set that aside, and I'll put my number 8 on it because the number B is most likely on the floor underneath a bunch of stuff. For fabric C, we need two 4 inch squares, which is just what we did. Let's say you forgot or you just don't feel like evening up the long edge. We're just going to cut. I'll show you a different way to do this. Now, you can tell right here, this is not straight. You see how it kind of comes out? And that has to do with starching, and ironing, and maybe I can tell on this one I probably didn't starch it quite evenly. This side's a little looser. This side feels a little more crisp. It's fine. I'm going to work with it. I need 2 4-inch squares. 4. I'm going to look for the 8 again. Now, you can see there's a big difference here because it's crooked. So here's 7.5, here's 8. I'm cutting it longer than 8. And because I didn't cut a straight edge, I'm going to move my ruler in just a bit. So you can see here's the 4, and I'm over here, but the fabric kind of goes this way. And then here the fabric goes this way. So we're going to cut 2 straight edges. And then we'll trim it down to get our 2 4-inch squares. Whichever way you like to do that. I kind of like evening up the long edge, because then next time when I go to use that piece of fabric, I have a clean edge for the rest of the piece. But you can do it this way as well. Set this aside. I have 2 clean edges. I'm going to flip it like this. I know this needs to be 4 inches wide, so let's trim this to 4 inches. And I can line up right here, make sure this is straight, and make sure this is straight. And now I need 2 4-inch squares. We'll cut 4, nice and straight here. There we go, straight across the top, straight across here. 4, get rid of that string, and 4. Line that up, checking to make sure I'm straight here, and across the top. That's our fabric C. Fabric D, 2 4.5-inch squares. So again, you can either get a clean edge, or I'm flipping it so the selve edge is at the top for me. So 2 4.5-inch squares. So 4.5 by 9 again. I'm going to turn the ruler around. 4.5. This piece of fabric happens to be straight. Perfect. 4.5. Going to cut it a little bit over 9 because this part isn't completely straight. Slow down at the top. And the reason I'm slowing down is I'm trying not to cut into the remaining fabric, but it will happen. You'll get little tiny cuts like that. Just try to minimize that, and that lets you get the most out of your fabric. Set that aside, and we need 2 4.5-inch squares. That's really crooked. It looked really straight. Let's see, 4.5, 4.5. I guess it is straight. My eyes are playing tricks on me. Let's trim that little bit extra off. Just the littlest tiny bit. And then 4.5. 4.5. That's the crooked edge. Let's see, is this edge straight? No, both edges are a little crooked. Let's even one up, and then we'll cut. So you're straight across, a little bit of fabric, a lot of bit of fabric. Four and a half. 4.5. Now I try to be as accurate as I can be, but it's fabric. It moves, it flows. It's not steel, it's not wood. It's never going to be perfect. I don't use any of the papers. I just do the best I can. When you're done, as long as you're, I'm going to call it reasonably accurate, it's going to look just fine. That's our fabric D. Fabric E, we need to cut 2 2-inch squares from both prints. So I have 2 prints. Let's cut both at the same time. I'm going to lay down 1 fat quarter, selvage is up there, and another fat quarter on top. I'm going to try to match them up. They're not going to match up perfectly because I haven't evened off any of the edges. Do you see that? So we need 2 2-inch squares from each print. I'm going to cut 2 by 4. Now this side is uneven and this side is uneven. We're going to do the same thing where we give a little bit extra on each side. So I'm going to go 2 inches and leave myself a little extra. Now I lined these up You want to make sure you haven't accidentally, like if you do this, you haven't accidentally done that. Do you see that? Try to line up one of the edges. We'll go back to the 2. I'll cut it about 2 1/4. And then I need to find 4. Here's 4 1/2. And I'm going to cut, this will be 4 because here's 3 1/2. This line will be 4. There. So I am slightly over 2 and slightly over 4. So same thing that we just did, just on a smaller scale. I'm going to have 2 clean edges. I'm not using my rotating cutting mat, so I'm going to keep these together and flip them, or you can cut one at a time. Let's trim down this side to 2. That's nice and straight. And then I'm going to slide my ruler down and we'll even up the top. And then we'll turn it. This side is straight, this side is straight, and this side is straight. 2 inches. And if they get kind of shifted like that, all I'll do is I'll just cut one at a time. You just want to make sure that you do the best you can. And again, if it's a little crooked, just, you know, if it's really crooked, recut it. But if it's like, I don't know, a hair off, usually I just go with it. There are our E's. Here's my fabric basket. Before I sit down to sew, I'm going to put everything away. I have all the creams together, and then I have the browns next, and I did pull a brown, so we'll put the brown away, and then I have pink and 1 red. Here's my pinks. We'll put the pink away. Actually, I have 2 reds. I have pink and red. This makes it easier for me when I go back next week to pick for another block. Rather than just tossing everything in together, I keep it sorted by color. So if I was working with, you know, red, blue, yellow colors of the rainbow, I would still sort it this way. I can set this aside. Here's all my fabrics. A, that's a B, remember? C, D, and E. Let's head over to the sewing machine. I'm going to be sewing on a Singer Featherweight model 221 today. Mine was made January 17th, 1955. Here's where I got the machine in case anyone's interested. She was great. She was really easy to work with. I sent her an email. I told her I was interested in getting a featherweight, one that I could use and sew with. I didn't want it painted. I didn't want it for display. I actually want to use the machine. She found me the machine, instruction book, all the accessories, and the case. The instruction books are really fun to look at if you've never seen any of these, especially the pictures. Lots of fun. So we're going to be sewing with that today. We're going to start with our block assembly. The first thing you want to do is draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of the fabric B squares. So fabric B, you've got 2 of those squares. Here's my fabric B squares, wrong side, and I'm going to use a Frixion fineliner. This will disappear when it's ironed. Technically, they're not for use with fabrics. They can leave what's called a ghost line, but this part we're not going to see. You can also use a water-soluble pen, a chalk marker, or if you have some diagonal seam tape, you can use that. And if you're using a more modern machine, you probably have a laser on your machine. I don't want to put this tape on the featherweight, so I'm going to do everything really traditional for this project. One thing I like to do when I'm drawing lines, if I have my cutting mat, I'll actually put the corner on a line on the mat, and a corner on the line on the mat, like that. Helps me line up my ruler. Go ahead and grab that. And I'm not going to press really hard. I'm just going to lightly draw a line. I can see it. It's very faint, but I can see it. That's all I need for sewing. And then we're going to draw a line on the other side, corner to corner. I can see it's very faint, but I can see the line. I went ahead and made that one a little bit darker. We're going to be matching it up with fabric C and stitching a 1/4 inch from each side of the drawn line. Since I'm sewing on the Featherweight and there's really no good way to measure that 1/4 inch, I'm going to draw a second line. It's going to make it easier for me. So you have your first line, and then on my ruler here, I actually have a 1/4 inch line. So what I'm going to do is lay that on top of the pink line that I just drew, and I'm going to grab another color. I've got a set of these. There's different colors. And I'm going to draw the line I'm going to sew on. There's the blue line. And let's do the other side. And I believe we're going to be trimming these down. So try to get your lines as, accurate as you can, but if they're not totally perfect, just don't stress about it. This should be fun. 1/4 inch line lined up with the pink line. And if you haven't drawn your pink line and you've got a ruler with a 1/4 inch line, you can line up the 1/4 inch corner to corner and then just draw the 2 sewing lines. Line there. Got all my lines. I need to grab my fabric C squares. Here's my fabric C squares. We're going to put these right sides together. Now if you're working with any kind of directional print, you need to pay attention if you lay it down this way or this way. Mine are completely non-directional. I'm going to lay them down. And we're going to be sewing on the blue line. These should match up. I'm going to add a pin over here. These are called magic pins. They're really thin. You can iron over them if you need to. I picked up a bent pin. I have this huge pile of pins and I always pick up a bent pin. We'll put one there and one here, and then we'll do the same thing for the other block. Right sides together, corner to corner. So if you have a machine with a laser or you're using that diagonal seam tape, you can just start right sides together and then sew your 1/4 inch away from the center. And we're going to do everything old-fashioned for this sew along. I've got these ready to go. We're going to head over to the machine. Here we are at the machine. You can see it's got a pretty bright light there, and it's a nice black one, so you see every scrap of fuzz. I do have some little fabric scraps. These will be used as leaders and enders. If you've never heard of that before, you'll get to see that. Some people like to make a secondary quilt. Instead of using leaders and enders, they might have 2.5 inch squares or other blocks they sew between blocks. I don't like to do that. One thing at a time is good enough for me. I'm using Aurifil color 2000, and my stitch length on this would probably be equivalent to a 2 on a regular sewing machine. You can see I have a scrap of fabric already on the machine. This is the leader, and I have a regular foot on the machine. There's no guide on this. When we go to put our pieces together, I have a 1/4 inch guide foot. This is a guide foot. See the black guide on the side? I got all the accessories for this from the same lady who helped me find the machine, and she helped me find the feet that I need for the machine. They make all different kinds of stuff for these machines. I'm going to advance this a little bit. And we're going to start by sewing on our blue lines. This piece will just stay there, and then I'll trim it off at the end. So I try to get my needle matched up with that blue line the best that I can. I'll probably be stitching a lot slower than most because I'm using the antique machine, but I'll speed it up for the video. Now I'm at the end of this piece. I'm going to start the next one right next to it. They call that chain piecing. I'm going to lift my foot and kind of get it out of the way, and then bring my next piece ready for it. There we go. That block is done on that side. What I can do is reach around back, cut off the first one, and we sewed on this side. I'm going to flip it, and we're going to sew on the other side. I want to get rid of this little guy too. Get that out of the way. If you're using a more modern machine, you've probably got a nice thread cutter. You can cut your threads between. Gonna do the same thing. Reach around back, trim this one, and we'll sew the next line. I'm at the end. I'm going to stick this. It's the same piece of fabric. Now they would call it an ender because I'm at the end. They say this helps save on thread, but what it really does with these older machines is it keeps the thread from popping out of the needle, so you don't have to keep rethreading your needle. I'm going to trim that, separate my blocks, take out my pins. I've removed the pins. We're going to take these over to the cutting table. Make sure your iron is turned on. Here's our triangles. I'm going to set one aside. We're going to cut on the marked line. That's my pink line, or it's corner to corner if you didn't draw a line. Grab my ruler, cutting either on your marked line or corner to corner. We're going to trim these to 3.5 inches finish. There's a couple ways to do this. I have this really neat 6.5 inch triangle square up ruler. This is by Quilt in a Day. You can Google Quilt in a Day. She's got a great website. And on this, it's got measurements, half measurements and full measurements. We're making a 3.5 inch. What you would do is lay down your triangle. You have the 3.5 inch line, and you line that up along the seam line like that, and you can see very little is actually going to be trimmed away, and you can trim it. And then you would take it to the iron and press it, and then trim away the little what they call dog ears, and it's going to be 3.5 inches square. I really like this ruler for this. The other way you can do this, if you don't have anything like that, all you'll do is press it. Let me take this to the iron and press it. Here it is pressed, and I pressed it to the dark, like this, toward the red. So when you're at your iron, like that, and you can get another ruler. If you have a 3.5 inch square ruler, you can line up the diagonal line like that, and then go around and trim. If you're working with the 6.5 by 12.5 inch ruler, you'll see it does have some diagonal lines, 45-degree lines. You can use that. And what I think I would do is line that up, trim a little bit. You can see the 3.5 is right here. So right here, see this 3.5 inch line? This is exactly 3.5 right there. Make sure that's straight. So that's 3.5. 1, 2, 3. There's a little 3.5 right there. And I've got the diagonal all lined up. Let's trim that. And then flip it around. Put that diagonal down again. I can see 3.5 right there. Make sure that's straight. Oh, that's nice and straight. Trim here, a little bit coming off, and now when you turn for this side, there is another line right there. You can put that there. Here's 3. Now see how it says number 3 instead of 3.5? The 3.5's further down and happens to be down there, but you can look at the ruler. 3. There's the 3.5. That looks good. I've got a little bit extra there. Let me make sure I put that line, the 45-degree line, get that lined up pretty straight. Cut a little bit off there. Turn it. I'm going to use that diagonal line. 3, 3.5. Go to 3.5. Make sure your diagonal's lined up. 3.5. Make sure we're straight on the bottom as well. That looks good. You can see very little bit is coming off. That's 2 ways to do that. So regular ruler, the Quilt in a Day ruler, I need to iron that and then clip these off. And let's go ahead and let's do one with the 3.5 inch square ruler. We'll give you 3 ways to measure, just for fun. I'm going to iron this. Again, press toward the dark. You can see how the friction pen disappears. There's no line there. I live in Arizona. It doesn't really get super cold here. I have heard from people who live in really, really cold environments that if they use a friction pen and the quilt gets cold, the line can reappear. So you never want to use a friction pen where you might see the line. 3.5 inch square ruler. It has a nice diagonal. Line up the diagonal on your block. And then you would just trim all the way around. This is a little Kimberly Cuts rotating cutting mat. It's the small one. Not much coming off this side. We'll go all the way around. There's really not a lot to trim on these. I will tell you, my favorite method if I'm making half square triangles like this is this ruler. I love this Quilt on a Day ruler. I bought it thinking I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. I have AccuQuilt dies as well. A lot of times I'll convert things to use AccuQuilt so I don't have to do trimming. This is just really handy to have. 3.5 inch along that seam line and trim. These two I just need to press toward the red and then clip off the little dog ears. We're going to set these aside for now and go to the next step. You want to grab your A and D fabrics, and I'm going to do one at a time. If you're comfortable with it, you can lay them on top of each other and cut both at the same time, but I'm just going to do one at a time. We don't have to do a whole bunch of these, so it's not a big deal. We're going to be cutting corner to corner and corner to corner. So I'm going to line that up on the line on my cutting mat to help make sure that my ruler is accurate. And then what I like to do is go ahead and open the rotary cutter, line it up on the corner, and then slide my ruler against it, and then I just adjust it so it meets at the top, corner to corner. Close but not totally accurate, so we'll see how that comes out. We will trim these down at the end, corner to corner. See if I do better on that one. Yeah, that's better. And we're going to set these aside. So you need to do that for your other fabric A and for your fabric Bs. We're going to make what they're calling an hourglass unit. So you have your A and your D. Fabric A, like this, and like this, and fabric D, like that, and like that. And then I will sew these two pieces together. We'll press it to the dark. These two pieces together, we'll press it to the dark, and then when we put our two halves together, the seams will nest. Let's take this over to the machine. For this step, I'm going to change the foot on my machine. What's nice about this machine and the Singer 66, and I'm using that for the Quilted Farm Girl sew along, if you want to sew along with me for that, is it has a thumb screw. No screwdriver required to change the foot. So we'll take this foot off. There's the regular foot. And we're going to put on the guide foot. I love guide feet. They just make it so much easier. Slide that there. Where's the hole? There's the hole for the thumb screw. Now you can bump your fabric right up against that guide if you've never seen a guide foot before. It's a 1/4 inch guide foot, so it gives you a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've got my fabric pieces here on this little mini cutting board. We're going to sew this one to this, and this one to this one. You can pin if you like. I'm going to go ahead and match these up right here. It's probably easier to pin before you're at your sewing machine. You can put a pin to hold that in place, and then take the other part of the block and match that up and pin that as well. Crooked pin again. Let's go ahead and sew these, and I don't sew over my pins. I pull them out as I sew. We're going to go over to the iron, and you want to press toward the brown and toward the brown. Here's everything pressed. Here's the front. Here's the back. See how it's pressed over toward the brown. And again, I'm going through this really slow for the first series. I'll probably go through certain steps faster as we go through. What this does, this allows your seams to nest. When you go to slide these two pieces together, they lock. I like pressing so things nest whenever possible rather than pressing open. Sometimes you have to press open because you'll have a bulky seam. Pin and pin. And I want to make sure this is straight, and the fabric did move a little bit. I'll add a pin here. And if you're comfortable sewing without pinning, and I'll be honest, a lot of times I don't pin. I just hold everything as I sew. But I thought for this video series I'll show you pinning. If you're new and you want to take the extra time and try and be really accurate, you can pin. personal preference. Line that up. Going to go ahead and sew along that line. You'll need to press this. Now you'll see if you press to the dark, that would be this way on top, to my right, and then to the left on the bottom. I usually just pick a direction and press, or if you want, for this, if you're using a small enough stitch length, I'm using a 2, you could press it open. I don't like to press open. I think it's more secure if I just pick a side and press to that side. I also long arm quilt, so I really prefer when things aren't pressed open. It looks pretty good. I'm going to go press this, and then we'll go to the table and we'll trim it. Here's my block, and you can look at your pattern. For the 9-inch, we need to trim it to 3.5 inches square. I'm going to go ahead and use the 3.5-inch ruler for this and show you a feature with this ruler. Right in the center of the ruler, see the little white circle? And then I've got the lines. I know exactly where the center is, and we have this 45-degree line running through it. So you can line it up and bullseye the center, and then line up your 45-degree as well. Now I can see when I get the center exactly where it needs to be, my 45-degree is off a little bit. You can also turn it. Maybe your other line is better. My other line is better. There you go. Now I've got that nice 45-degree. And you can see I've got a little extra here, 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 and on this side, which is great. The directions for cutting the fabric give us a block that's a little bit bigger, so we can trim away the extra. So if our block's a little crooked, that's going to end up straight at the end. The one thing about this kind of ruler and the rotating cutting mat, you really need to hold it down. Try not to let it slip. I mean, if it slips, you just have to line it up again. I'll need to make 3 more of these. We need 4 of these total. Let's go ahead and piece our 4-patch unit with our fabric ease. You've got 2 of each color. 1, 2, and 1, 2. We'll take this over to the machine. Since these are squares, I'm just going to sew without pinning or clipping. Take 2, lay them down, line them up, double check, make sure everything is straight. Sew that. I've got these ready to go. I am going to press it to the dark side. This is going to go this way. But I'm going to go ahead and just finger press this right now while I'm at the machine, and we'll finish sewing this part together. Press that to that side. Finger press, that means just using your fingers or your fingernails. If you've got a little seam roller, I'll try to remember to show that next time. You can just roll over it. I'm going to lay this down here. Lock my seams together. Hold that and stitch this. So this is what it's like stitching without pins or clips. There's a lot of holding things. Let's stitch this. That's all done. I need to take this to the iron and press it, and then we'll trim it down. This is another one that trims to 3.5 inches square. This is the easiest way to do that. If you're working with a bigger ruler, you can just measure and line up. You can look for that 3.5. This is almost exact, I can tell. In fact, mine might even be a little tight on a couple of the sides, so I'm just going to measure. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm actually going to trim anything. Let's put this down. I've got everything lined up. I've got a couple little fuzzies. This side's a little short, I can tell. It's not going to matter, at least not for me. It's probably maybe a 1/16 of an inch, maybe, not very much. A little extra there, and that side doesn't need to be trimmed. Let's put our block together. We're going to lay out our block according to the picture. Get your picture in front of you. If your center block came out really crooked, you may want to redo that because that's the foundation of the whole block. Or if something is cut like that, maybe you cut one side short, just be careful, make sure to account for that as you're putting your block together. I'm going to lay down the center, and then we have our hourglass blocks like this, with the darker piece here and the lighter piece here. So make sure you do the same thing on both sides. So dark, 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 dark. And then at the top and bottom of the block, they go the other direction. The darker pieces are on the right and the left. the right and the left. And you have your corner pieces. The light color faces in. So there's the light color. I'm going to face the light color in. Light color in. Ooh, that's pretty. I like that. Light color in. That looks good. I just realized I made a gold star, so I gave myself a gold star for the day. We're going to sew everything together in rows. I'm going to go ahead and follow the instructions. I'm going to separate these a little bit. It'll make it easier. If you look at the picture here, the little arrows tell you which way to press everything as you're putting it together. So we're going to sew this row and see how you're pressing toward the dark. Here you're pressing out, and here you're pressing toward the dark. So as you put your rows together, all the seams are going to nest. I'm going to keep it like this and head over the machine, and then what I like to do is also these two, and these two first. And I brought my roller over to the machine. I'll show you how to use that. This is a Lori Holt seam roller, and then we'll roll those as if they were pressed, and then we'll sew these together and we'll put the whole block together. Let's go back over to the sewing machine. I've got my design board right here. These are the first two pieces. So if you want to pin, you can pin, or if you want, you can just try to do it by hand. Now you'll notice, because of the way we pressed, these are going to lock. These also nest. That's really nice. I think I'll go ahead and take a minute and pin. We'll pin here, and then you can feel this seam as well. Make sure everything's nice and lined up, and we'll add another pin. Then you can go to the next piece. Our next two pieces are these two. There's nothing to nest, there's nothing to match up, so match up your block the best that you can. I'm just going to put a pin in the middle. That one's ready. And then our bottom two, I've got the next two here. This is the bottom. This is rotated. So when I put these together, it actually doesn't nest up here at the top, but it does nest here at the bottom. So I'll start at the bottom. Just keep track of where you're going to be sewing. And make sure you don't rotate anything. You don't want to have to pick it out. If you do, it's not the end of the world. Right there. And right there. And then I'm going to open it and glance over at my picture, make sure that's right. That is correct. Let's sew all three of these. Now if you're comfortable with it, you can leave these all joined together. When things start to get big, I actually like to separate them. I find it too difficult to work with the big pieces joined together. I'm going to separate those. Let me show you the seam roller. This is the bottom piece we just put together, and we're going to press toward the brown. Like that. You can finger press it, you can take it to the iron. Here's the little seam roller. It's like a little rolling pin. It'll help hold it flat, and then I don't have to go to the iron right now. That's good enough to sew the next part together. The middle part doesn't press toward the dark side, it actually presses toward the light, like this. Press that. You can press open if you want, I'm not going to. I prefer the seams to nest. And then we've got the top part, like this, and that's going to go this direction toward the hourglass. And then we're ready to stitch the three on the other side. Take a minute, line everything up and pin it, and then we'll sew all those together. Here's all my rows. I'm going to take it to the iron and press at this point. I want to make sure everything is nice and flat so I can pin my rows and sew my rows together. Everything is pressed, and if you pressed according to the instructions, when you go to put these together, the seams will nest. Double check your block layout, have a look at it, making sure everything is in the right place, all the fabrics are pointing the right direction, and then go ahead and match these up. I'll clip these. These are little quilting clips. I'm going to turn this towards me. It'll be a little bit easier. I'm going to slide the seam together and get that to nest. And then you can take a clip and clip it right over the seam. And I'm going to clip that. And I'm going to do the other side at the same time. You don't have to. You can go sew that. But since I'm here and I'm in front of the camera, let's just do the other side. And let's make sure I don't flip it the wrong way. And let's go ahead and then clip these. Normally I would do one side, press it, and do the other side and press it. But I'm moving the camera quite a bit, so we'll just do that right here. Make sure your seams are nesting. Clip that. Now I'm going to go to the machine and stitch this side and this side. Let's stitch our last 2 seams and then we'll press our block and we'll trim it. Let's have a look at it. I think pinning is more accurate than clipping. Let's see. Yep, definitely pinning's more accurate than clipping. This looks really good. I have a little gap there. Do you see that little gap? That little bit of white? A little bit, tiniest bit there. I haven't pressed this yet either. And wow, a little bit of tiny bit off right there. Now, if that happens to you, what I'm going to say is, chances are nobody's going to notice it but you. If it bothers you, unpick it, pin it, restitch it. Doesn't bother me. I'm never going to see it when it's in the entire quilt. Nobody else is going to notice it. If you're making something to take to a state fair and to have it judged, then you might want to pick it out and make sure all your little corners line up. I think it looks beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and press these last 2 seams, and it tells us to press out. Here's those last 2 seams pressed out. Here's our block. I think it looks great. I am not concerned about there. That one's the worst one. About that not matching up. Again, nobody's going to see it. We can trim this to 9.5 inches square. I do not have a 9.5 inch square ruler. Let's grab this guy. It looks good. It's a hair over 9.5. And I'm going to line it up this way. That's just about 9.5. So I want to be careful about trimming this. I think the only thing I want to do is line it up. I'm going to pick a straight line on my ruler, line it up on one of the seams, bump it over, and I'm looking for anything that really sticks out. I've got a little bit of thread here and a tiny little bit right down there. Can you see what cut off? That and that. You can trim it if you want. Little tiny bits like that. With the bigger blocks, when you put your quilt together, I don't think it makes that much of a difference, but you might as well take the extra time. Get that little, just the little bits off. It'll make your quilt go together a little bit easier. It's just tiny bits. 2 more sides. The other thing you can look at when you're trimming your block, you'll have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. You can look on your ruler, measure that 1/4 inch. Now, do I have a 1/4 inch where the point is? Here I do, here I don't. It's a little crooked, do you see that? So what that means is when I'm putting this together, this point matches almost exact. This one, the 1/4 inch lays slightly over the point, so I'm going to lose point of the block. I really don't care. It's not going to bother me. It's going to look great when it's put together. This looks good. These corners look good. I look like I have more than a 1/4 inch. No, it's about a 1/4 inch. Let's spin it around. Let's just measure for fun. Let's see how accurate I am today. Sewing on the Featherweight is definitely different than sewing on my Juki. That looks really good. This one looks good as well. So let's say you've got a block like this where one side is definitely shorter. Now let's look at this. If I want that 1/4 inch, this is actually really straight. Right about here, from here to the top, this is short. Here's what I like to do with that. I'll grab 2 clips. Where does it start to get short? Right about here and right about here. Now I know this is short, so when I go to sew this into the quilt at the end, I watch for the short side and I'll account for that. Let's pretend we're sewing it together. and this was a piece of fabric. So what I would do is match this up like that, and then make sure this part is straight. Then you would start to see the fabric underneath. See the ruler? And then you don't see the ruler because this side would match the other piece of fabric, and you were pretending the ruler's a piece of fabric. Like that. So it's not off by very much, and I'll be able to easily account for that when we sew this together. I hope you've enjoyed making the first block of Sewcialites 3 with me. Again, this was number 1, The Idyllic Block by Chelsea Stratton. I'll be back next week with block number 2. Blocks are released by Fat Quarter Shop on Friday. I'll do the best that I can to get a video up by Saturday, maybe Sunday the latest. I do all the filming and editing myself, and then videos have to be uploaded. Everything takes a little bit of time. I'll do my best to get them posted within a day or two of the block release. Please like, subscribe, and share. Leave any comments or questions below. Check out the other videos on my channel. I'm also sewing along with the quilted Farm Girl Quilt Along. I have a lot of machine embroidery. There's floss tubes and crafty vlogs if you like cross stitch, embroidery, quilting, and there's rope crafts. I do a lot of crafts, and soon I'm going to be bringing some yarn crafts to the channel. I'll be back again next week with the next block for Sewcialites 3. I'll see you then.